Hello. Good morning, everyone. It's kind of a new setup today. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone this Thursday, this lovely Thursday? I'm gonna give a few more seconds so that our participants can tune in. Hello, good morning. Lovely to see you. Okay, so I think let's start. We are today at the third sessions of the Google Startup Masterclass Series. Would be very happy to see you all again this week on Thursday. It's a bit different setup than we normally have because the whole sessions today we have more speaker and it's gonna be a very exciting panel discussions. I will not be the host today. I will introduce you to the host of the panelists very soon. But before we start, I want to go through a few guidelines that we usually have. It's actually, I guess in the first one, it's not applicable this time. But when same as the previous sessions, if you have questions, please drop it in the comment and start with ask so that we can identify the question easy. The session will be recorded and will be shared. So very exciting part. I will introduce to you the panelists today, and we're gonna see them on the screen very soon. So let's start first. I'd like to introduce Thye from Google, the head of Startup Ecosystem, Southeast Asia, South Asia Frontier, and Great China region. And hello, Bob.
Hey, hi. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Good morning.
Morning.
Let me introduce the second panelist, that is Bobby. Hi, Bobby. You're on the screen with everyone.
Hello,
Bobby
everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Hey, Bobby. It's good.
So looking forward to get grilled by you.
Oh man, I won't do that to friends. So don't worry.
Okay, and we have the third panelist, that is Huong Chen from Monk Hill Ventures. Hi, Huong.
Oh, Huong,
yeah, sorry, I was on mute, didn't realize that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, and always good to see all faces, all friends around, and I hope to see new faces in the audience too. Looking forward to the session.
And last but not least, let me introduce Tuyet from Vietnam National Innovation Center, the Senior Advisor on Innovation. Hi, Tuyet.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm gonna give the stage back over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Ha. Well, once again, just want to say that it's really good to be among friends. This is going to be rather casual. The topic of today's panel discussion is really understanding the opportunities that startups will be presented during winter. And when we say winter, we're not referring to the seasonality or the season of winter. We're talking about funding winter and how startups, are facing new challenges and how they would be able to react to those, right? So I just want to kick off to say that, throughout this entire panel discussion, if you have any questions, feel free to kind of raise them in the chat. And we'll have an opportunity to be able to take Q&A later on. So just very quickly, before we jump into such a serious topic, Christmas is on the horizon, happening really soon. Just anyone have any interesting Christmas plans in the next few weeks? Bobby, you want to share what's happening in Christmas? You do.
No, not really. Usually, it's usually I'll use this period of time to basically remain quiet reflect,
Wow.
and enjoy, this me time, because throughout the whole year, we deal with a lot of meetings, calls, travel, so on and so forth. So I think it's always good to sort of calm yourself down a little bit, and then looking forward to 2024.
Well said. Yeah, I feel the same. I think this year is so fast paced, at least for me. I'm going to Italy next month, so I'm looking forward to it. First time, I've never been to Italy, and me and my friends were actually thinking of doing a little bit of snowboarding, but definitely need a little bit of me time for sure. Huong, what about you? Like, any plans for
I'm
Christmas?
just so envious, dude. Italy. Can't beat that. Are you gonna be like Como?
Going to be in Milan, and I'll be very honest. I have no idea where the lake is.
You
I'm
don't
very
need to know as long as someone is your travel planner. Doesn't
well.
have to
I'll
be
look it
you.
up online, but I'll take that as a suggestion. What about yourself? Like, what are you going to be doing for Christmas?
Great question. I mean, we are talking about winter. Where is winter in Southeast Asia? Tell me. I would
Mm,
be trying to head there with
Hanoi,
snow. I know it doesn't have snow, my friend.
Sapa,
um,
Sapa. Try your luck
Sapa,
in
does it
Sapa.
snow this year?
It did earlier.
Oh,
oh,
okay. So
Yeah,
I may
it
be
did
chasing
earlier.
the snow, but I used to be a travel planner up until I have a child. Now I'm pretty last minute, usually booking
Mhm.
tickets 2 days prior, very last
Yeah.
minute impromptu impulsive trip planner now. So yeah, depends on how I feel, whether I need more sun or a beach or snow. I'll be heading out, but I have a feeling this year might be the beach that we're hitting. So if
mm,
folks have great beaches recommendations, send my way. Haven't planned.
I love how spontaneous you are.
Well,
That's
wait till you have a child. You'll see that it will happen.
Well, I resonate with that, Hương. Well, I guess I'm on a Bobby camp. I'm like, the introvert camp. It's been like a crazy year for me. I've been traveling a lot more than I used to, even when I was in my high tower consulting life. So it has been quite a high octane year. So I probably would disappear into the wood and, you know, find some quiet me time.
all right. Point taken. We will not disturb you. You know, when you
I'm
are
gonna be off the grid. You cannot even touch. Yeah.
all right. Well, let's just jump straight into it, right? We're talking about winter right here, and we have a list of questions that I would love to get your perspective on. And just starting off with exploring the broader context, right? From your day-to-day interaction with startups, right? Do you see any significant difference in terms of how startups in Vietnam compared to startups in other countries and region view the current economic climate, and how are they actually responding to it?
Hmm.
Bobby, you want to go first?
Wow. See, friend grilling friend. Tough question. um, okay, I'm more of a positive type of person. I see this as something new.
Mm,
Um, as investors, we obviously give as much insight as we can, because we receive, certain reports from certain quarters, about the economy, about the situation. I think it's, I would say we are going back to the fundamentals. We've got to look at companies that have strong fundamentals, that have a real reason why they should be around, and not just based on the hype or money chasing after ideas, which had its run before the pandemic and a little bit after the pandemic. Even the so-called unicorn heroes that we read about in the paper, are going through the same thing,
mm,
whereby we realize that there's no strong fundamentals in terms of business. I mean, to put it more crudely, I think the availability of money led to a situation whereby you basically buy growth instead of actual growth. So I think a lot of especially at our early stage, we tell them to basically pay attention, to building strong fundamentals.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Bobby. I think it all comes down to really understanding, building a strong foundation of a business, and really understanding the niche that you're going after, especially when funding is getting scarce at this point of time. Tuyet, I just want to get your perspective here. Through your experience of interacting with startups from other regions, do you see a difference in terms of how Vietnamese startups are approaching this current situation?
I can't claim to be as knowledgeable as, for example, Huong or Bobby in the exposure to other country startup. What I have been hearing and also seeing is that probably this is also how to really sit back and reflect on the why, like why did they even start? Why this business exists at all? And in the time that is so challenging, when the resource is scarce, it takes a lot of resilience and determination and really like being really crazy about a certain vision to push through. So the why is so important, and with the right whys and with the right patience, I think it would be the kind of right mentality to build a strong foundation that Bobby mentioned earlier. Because I guess in the last couple of before the whole thing hit, everything seems to be so optimistic. It seems like you can build a huge company overnight. But I guess the whole situation now would also challenge the notion of success and the virtue of being patient, instead of expecting something that can be humongous over a short period of time. And that adjustment in mentality can also reflect in the mindset and the thinking around approaching business and approaching the real problems that people are willing to pay for solutions. So that is my take, at least from my limited exposure to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think what you've just mentioned really built on top of what Bobby has shared. Really understanding the why. And from my limited experience, I've only been really active in the Vietnam ecosystem in the last few years. I just felt that there's so much resilience that Vietnam startups, Vietnam founders have showcased, which is so innate and ingrained in their character and personality that if I can get money from VCs, let me go figure out where else I can get the funds, right? And it's just that hustling nature that I've noticed is a big difference in terms of how startup founders in Vietnam are approaching this situation. Huong, the next question is for you. So, but before I jump into that, just see if you have any perspective you want to add to this question.
Yeah, sure. So I think I echo the sentiment that folks have mentioned earlier. I think generally speaking, the money that early stage startups need, the capital either comes from ventures, investors, or customers, right? It's got to be coming from one of these sources, or else it comes from the founders' pockets. What I do see is really, truly, it is going to be a time where in the language of Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel, only the paranoid survives, right? The goodness will survive. So, my apologies. Do you guys hear some music, or is it just
Yeah,
me?
I was about to say, like, it seems like there's some pipe-in music. I love the
So
tune.
Christmassy already.
Sorry, I think it's me.
Oh, wow. Fancy, Bobby.
Yeah, really fancy.
Are you in your winter retreat already?
He's
Okay.
probably already.
Yeah, sorry. I always have a music in the background. It's sort of like gives me that cafe feel when I work.
You can bring it to the foreground, no problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to follow up on what we were talking about earlier, I think the money would have to come from somewhere, right? Either that or you have to reduce cost. It's just pure unit economics 101 before founders break even or, profitability or anything. So in times of, cash crunch like this, what I have seen in general is, and I don't know if it is so different from one country to another, more so than from one founder to another, right? It's more of a personal style of leadership, financial management, 360 management in order to get what you need to do with less. It is so challenging because you always want more done as founders. But now with the current capital situation, you have to do more with less. So
Yeah,
that is
agree.
in and of itself the most interesting test of time that we're seeing, that in fact it will, I think, whichever founders emerge from this will be the strongest, which, and not necessarily strong, but it may, in the language of any growth, the paranoids will survive. So I think it's less so of a regional geography question. It's more so of leadership management question.
I really like what you say. Personally, I'm going through the same thing in Google. The lingo.
You have to cut costs too.
Well, yeah, well, not gonna lie, the news is in the public, like the whole layoff situation.
Yeah.
But what we've got to do is that me and my team have to really figure out what exactly is our focus, and where exactly should we be investing our resources, and what is the impact that we're going after. The whole exercise of prioritizing and understanding where we want to spend our time has become so important, especially this year. So a lot of what you just mentioned, definitely resonates. And I just want to raise that point to say that not only applies to entrepreneurs, but even people in corporates, they're actually going through the same exercise as well. I just want to unpack that a little bit. And what are some of the strategies or some of the approaches that you have seen that founders have taken to do just that, right? To really find focus, to really understand how they should be building their businesses and ensure that they are able to sustain throughout this winter, and also how have they adapted their style to fundraising. And maybe this is a question more to Huong and also Bobby as VCs in your own capacity.
Bobby, you want to go first?
No, you go first. No, you go first.
Sure. I can't compete with your music in the background. Yeah. So great question, Bulk. How did founders adapt to this? Right. They've got to, and fundraising has become longer than before than the last couple of years. I've also seen that the round has become, you've still got to, in order to raise, you still got to show some traction, right? In order to get the story to a place where we can see and underwrite for you to get to the next milestone. So what we do see is people breaking down these milestones into smaller periods of time, so then they can accomplish. It's a little bit more within reach. And so within that, what that means is the round becomes a bit smaller, right? And I'm talking particularly for early stages where most of our investments are. So we see, for instance, instead of raising, a seed round right away, where it could be, $1 million or more, people are more willing to go a little bit earlier, given that their traction is not quite there. So they break it into smaller rounds. Where they could potentially shop around between more angels and the pre-seed stage a bit more, and so that's one. The second part of it is I've also seen founders being a lot more strategic in terms of capital needs, in terms of milestones that they could achieve within that capital needs that they're raising for. They also are more strategic about the trade-offs between cash flow and valuation. And I think again, all of these attributes the fact that certain founders who are more paranoid, who prioritize the right thing in the right time, I think those are more suited, are more fitted in order to win in the long term. And I see a preference over founders who view this and in this for the long term rather than those who are looking for a quick quick fix, right? Which it's not easy to get these days anymore. So these are some of the quick superficial things that I do see. If you go a bit deeper and dig into the fundamentals, we've also seen founders that are focused a lot more on operationally customers, getting the customer validation feedback loop a lot faster than before, getting the sales, they're getting the revenue. Obviously, the product is important in order to get revenue, right? But the end game of the feedback loop is getting customer validation, sell and sell and sell as possible, as fast as you possibly can. So I think we see a lot more founders focus on that. I think our tech talent report from Glenn's, one of our articles, has also shown that in our survey, a lot more positions in sales have been opened up this year compared to, say, some of the other functions. Obviously, dev has always been undersupplied, so that has always been rising. But on top of that, we're seeing sales positions also rise everywhere. I think it's a testament to founders have shifted their focus in terms of getting their revenue numbers. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I've observed.
Thanks. Bobby, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So, okay, we don't publicize this part of our investment, but we do have a smaller check size program called the Touchstone Fellowship Program, right? To what Huong mentioned earlier. I mean, we do see a lot of founders coming out of the woodworks, from the corporate side, or they were part of a more successful startup, and Vietnamese being so entrepreneurial decide to basically go into startups. So what we do is that we give if we like the idea, we like the profile of the founders, meaning the experience and all that stuff, we'll cut a small check anywhere from 50 to 100,000. We have done about 6 or 7 of such deals, and basically that money is for them to basically discover their validation, to discover a proper market fit, and work on something rather than I mean, we read about 0 to 1. So this is something like maybe 0 to 0.5, and then for them to achieve certain milestone or KPIs, and then we follow on with a bigger check. And even at Touchstone, we basically divvy up the capital into 2 tranches, so that they are able to meet the KPIs, and then if they do, we actually reward them with a higher valuation, right? It's something that is not often done. You hear of follow-on round and all that stuff, but then in there, what we built is that we basically need to especially in this difficult times, we try to de-risk things, not just for us but also for for the founders. And it's amazing to see how these founders, even with a small check size of 50, 100,000, and how far they could go. Of course, you have some winners and some losers, but I think it gives us an indication of where in general where the whole path of starting up is heading towards, right? I mean, for me, I feel that I know it doesn't sound sexy at all, but I think generally startups are glorified SMEs. And I said this many times at the program. I even tell some of your the cohort basically to not do startups, to really focus on the business, because when VCs step in, we see things from a different lens, right? And it may not be fair for them, or they may not have the experience to basically have that kind of growth. So yeah, I think everything what Hung mentioned is true, of course, and we are all seeing it. And I think if at all, I think this is how we adapt to the market, right? Not to say that we have found the right formula. I mean, that's something that we are comfortable in working, and with the team construct that we have at Touchstone, I think this is how we will be approaching our basically investment down the line.
Got it. That's super interesting. I realize you have that program especially to enable zero to like your words 0.5 startups to get it off the ground. For startups who are tuning in, if you fall into that segment, you know who to reach out to. Bobby is most probably the person you definitely need to get in contact with. But I really liked a few things from that you mentioned, like really shortening the sales cycle, really focusing in getting revenue as quickly as possible, and proving that there is a product market fit has becoming increasingly important to instill confidence and able to show that result during fundraising. I think those are kind of like the strong points that the audience can take away. So thanks for imparting that insight. Switching gears, to resource allocation and prioritization, and this question is for you, Tuyet. What key advice would you offer startups regarding allocating and prioritizing their resources effectively during these challenging economic times?
I have a chance to work with a couple of startups recently in these situations, and some of the key learning for me, and also I would say, for the startups, is really, first of all, understanding what are their main goals, like what is the biggest thing that they want to achieve. Some of them seems to not have a clarity of the one thing that they need to achieve yet, because everything else from resource allocations, how you optimize your operations, how do you allocate your very limited remaining resource to hit that goal, is only be done effectively if you know what your goal is. There's a couple of very interesting situations. I just don't know how to fix yet, and I'm still learning myself. One situation is when the startup in short of cash, trying to fundraise, and thought that keep growing unhealthily with the very bad unit economics could be something that attract investor. And in that case, it is very challenging conversations with the startup founder and say, hey, do you really understand the game here? Do you understand what VCs are looking for? What are the options of financing on the table? What is the best fit for your situation and for your company, for your style, for your dreams, etc.? VC is not the only path. There are many other options, but as long as they don't understand or don't yet have the clarity about what they want, what fits and what not, it's really hard to say what would be the right options for them. And then it's going to be time wasted trying to chase the goal, trying to realign all of the resources, very scarce and very precious resource, against a goal that is actually not the right goal. So I guess the first thing is, maybe it's hard, but I would always encourage the founder that I work with to just take some time. Doesn't need to be 2 months, 3 months, just like 2 or 3 days away from operation, away from the hectic, and really think through, sit down and distill the whole situation and have a clarity, because without them having the right clarity, it's really hard to do everything else. So that is the first thing. The second thing is really to see, this is like a theory about boundary of the firm. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, this is like one of the Nobel Prize winning topic many years ago, and it's very relevant in this time. What is the boundary of your particular company? What do you keep indoor, and what would you participate with other people, collaborate with them, partner with them? Do you want to keep everything in? And what it means is that it's going to consume more resource, it's not optimized, or you just want to keep something that is going to build your long-term competitive advantage and outsource everything else. There was a very recent conversation with a startup founder, and during the process of visiting them and visiting their customers, we figured that, why is that their customer having so many different contact points? There is a solution in the market where all of these contacts can be consolidated, and you can partner with them to improve the customer experience, improve the sales, and also increase the retention. And the first response the founder gave to us was like, no, I don't trust Vietnamese product, especially Vietnamese software. So I build everything inside. And in that situation, he doesn't even have the money. He doesn't have the tech team. So for me, that is a telling, because if you don't know yet where is your boundary, or where do you want to spend your resource to build your core competitive advantage, that no one is better than you, and you try to keep doing everything in-house, it just doesn't work. And then there's another situations where I think, the founder is so open-minded. He's willing to sit down and say, hey, this is my team, this is the org chart, this is the allocation of the resource, this is the work, the task each of this position is covering. I'm willing to outsource this. I will definitely keep that. And for me, this is the right approach. Like, really understand that the survival is key. Understand that in the long run, if the startup survive this time, this is what he wants to be the best in the market. And for the rest, he doesn't care. He'd be like, okay, I'm willing to share the cost. I'm willing to work with external outsource. And I'm willing to work with other startups to help each other going through this period of time. So I guess the mentality, the kind of open-mindedness comes first. Clarity comes second. Actually, maybe it's the wrong order. Clarity, open-mindedness, and really sit down and being really, really thorough and details about what to keep and what to collaborate.
Thank you, Tuyet, for those 3 points.
My approach.
Yeah. I just want to add on, and this reminded me of something you mentioned, Huong, in the panel discussion when Bobby was moderating in the bootcamp, where you told the founders, like, if you chase the money, if you chase VCs, you're basically losing sight of where your priorities are focused. But if you chase the users, then you're on the way of building a potentially successful business, because you're at service of the users in service of their problem. And I think that stick with me from that panel. And I think I really strongly believe that in terms of prioritization, is really understanding, just to add on to what you mentioned, Threat, is really understanding the user needs, the market needs, and really focusing on understanding the value that you're providing to the users. And spending a lot of time just being able to get clarity in that area of thinking is so important, because it then drives the company's direction, the strategies, the resource allocation. And when you tell that story, a lot of fundraising is also telling the story and the narrative of the company and the mission. Everything will be crystal clear if you just focus on the user. That's one aspect of it, but I thought I'd just bring it up. So the next question is for you, Bobby. From your experience working with early stage startups, are you able to share some insights on how startups pivot their products and business model effectively during winter?
Tough question, right?
Or if you've not seen anyone done it successfully, that's also another.
I wouldn't. Okay, we still do not know. All right, but what I do admire founders in that and it goes to what Tuyet mentioned about having clarity of mind and fundamentals, right? Recently, I had a lunch gathering with some alumni of the FI program that I'm part of in Vietnam. Some of them have stuck on to what they're doing. Some of them have actually changed. One particular startup, give a shout out. It's called Comic Con. So they started off, being in a Web3 space, basically trying to tokenize the comic creator marketplace. Then, of course, if they're talking about startup winter, then Web3 is definitely in deep freeze at the moment. So what he has done, actually, he's still kept to the same idea of working with the comic creators, but now at a Web2 level, whereby now it becomes a platform for creators, who are doing who like to basically do like manga or comics, right? I think it's more comics rather than manga. But so one of the titles that he has is actually a top 5 in Vietnam. Of course, in Vietnamese, I don't remember the title. Anyway, so in that respect, I do have a lot of respect for this founder, right? To be able to say that, hey, you know what, Web3 is really not the way to go. Let me find something else, and he still keeps going, right? And you see that being a common thread with a lot of founders in Vietnam, that they'll move from either from within, the idea changing, tweaking a little bit. And I think it comes down to really understanding who the customers are, right? Back to what you mentioned earlier about what Huong said in the previous panel about focusing on the customers, right? And that is, if anything else, that shows pretty good understanding of the fundamentals. At the end of the day, VCs are not buying your product. They're giving you a lump sum of money to help build the company, but not necessarily we are users. I mean, seriously, how many of the products that we invest in, we are actual users? And even if we are, we are just a small part of this whole buying cycle, right?
Speak for yourself, Bobby. I try to use their products before I invest.
Yeah, we test it out, but yeah, we test it out, but to use it, sort of in a regular manner,
Daily
for
life,
example.
yeah.
I mean, we invested in Revi, and of course, every time I'm around the area, we'll buy coffee from there, right?
I'll tell you, I sit on the board of a company that produces medical device to help couples trying to conceive. And I can guarantee you I'm not using that.
There you go. See, I mean, so I like to think that, our money is going to a greater good, not for our own personal use, right? Yeah, so I think, that would be that special something that I think, Vietnamese founders have, to overcome, any kind of difficulties, right? And I like the fact that, because of this so-called winter, right, a lot of founders are actually going back to, fundamentals, discovering the whys, the hows, the whos, that their product is suitable for.
Thanks a lot, Bobby. I'm so tempted to ask you a Gen AI startup question, but I know that I'll save that for later. Maybe episode 2, if we are actually doing one. I'm seeing a lot of early stage startups, coming in and saying that, hey, we're using Gen AI to do certain things, certain use cases, but I'm not entirely sure. How to not say how to, but a lot of them are kind of like solving really common use cases with Gen AI, and not very sure in terms of like the scalability and the sustainability of that business is viable.
Well, I'll quickly chime in on that. Not to burst anyone's bubble here, right? I mean, are they using Gen AI like the way we use Excel, or are they really Excel? I look at it, from a very simplistic standpoint, right? If you're incorporating Gen AI to help build your company, that's fine. That does not mean you're a Gen AI, led company. You're just basically using tools available to strengthen certain parts of your build, to help a better flow of the product line that you have. And there's nothing wrong with it. right? It's just that you're not a Gen AI led, company. You're not a, deep tech. And if you do not have, at least 5 years of deep research, right? Then I don't think you are really a Gen AI company. Just using Gen AI, it's like using Excel. It's, does not make you a, a compute-led company.
Thanks, Bobby. Next question is for you, Huong. This is pertaining to your experience working with later stage startups. And it's the same question. Like, have you seen, any later stage startups who have done successful pivots, find success in these difficult circumstances?
Great question. A difficult question, as the nature of pivots are super challenging to navigate, regardless of at whichever stage of a startup life cycle. Have we seen pivots? Believe it or not, but even at Series A, even after we have come in and funded the startups, that we've still seen startups go through a time where they hit some sort of a ceiling plateau a little bit in terms of growth. And then, I'm sorry for the background noise. Let me just
No
leave
worries.
that. Yeah. And then, we have to sit down and help them through and strategizing with them in the bench with them to get through the next milestone of fundraising as well. It is hard, regardless of whether you are at a pre-seed stage or seed stage or a Series A stage. And most people would think that it only happens pre-product market fit. The truth is that it could happen at any stage of the business. As you are growing and you are hitting some sort of a ceiling or a plateau, then you would have to regroup, strategize with your team, and think about how to move past that in order to obtain a certain kind of growth that is expected of a high growth startup, right? Because otherwise it would be sort of what Bobby was saying earlier. It's a glorified SME, and that's growth is the only that differentiates a small, medium-sized business versus a startup, right? The expected return is a lot higher. Let's face it. So pivots are unavoidable. I think the key question here is, how does the team manage to get through it intact as a whole, and continuously validate and innovate to get through the next set of growth levers, right? That sounds interesting. That sounds as part of the expected playbook of a startup founder. But the truth is, it's hard because it's not just the actual market problem, product problem that they're solving. There's a big piece that's hidden here, which is the team problem, right? And I think what we've seen is that, at the core of many successes or failures is actually the team component that makes it or breaks it, right? The rest of it, the market components, the product components, giving them the right amount of ingredients, the right amount of skill sets, experience on the team, and time for them to validate, I think they'll get there. I think the challenges that break them for the most part that we're seeing is in the team, whether they have been able to assemble the right set of skills on the team to solve for that, or the right advisory around them, or whether the team themselves have been able to weather these challenges together. And so at Series A, I think there's a bit higher chance for them to get through that, because at least you've got through an institutional round of an institutional investor who have already done, again, as presumably extensive due diligence on you, and have already joined your founding team as a board seat. So someone is vested to see you succeed and use all their resources to work alongside with you. I mean, at least in our case, we're known to put a lot of work into founders and teams even before we give them a term sheet. And that's the process that we believe is called earn our trust with founders. And it's a two-way process because trust is not something that is transactional. It could not be done overnight. It is a process that takes time and sweat. And so in our case, we've gone through the trenches helping founders along the way. After we come in and take the board seat and work with them to figure out where the next level of growth would come in from, and work very closely with them. But I would say that's for Series A onwards. Before that, I understand that startup pivots are hard, and founders sometimes don't even have board members. They may have advisory board members, but not necessarily fiduciary duty, board members. And so it's harder, right? So it is then again, the biggest assets the pre-seed, pre-product market fit founders have really are themselves, the founders. And so in this case, we would have to go back to, I think one of our panelists here, Tuyet, was talking about that, highly resonate with that, which is the why. Why would a founding team do this? Because it's so hard, right? In tough times, we have to go back to the core values. And if that is strong, if there's a strong connection, not just with the customers, the market, the product, but I would say also with the founders themselves, right? Why would someone set out to solve this problem in the first place? Because if there's such a strong connection that I call founder fit, then the founder would turn what they have into unfair advantages in order to win. But in tough times, if that connection is so loose and it's not even there, it's pretty easy for them to just throw in the towel and say, let's move on to something else.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think that's a good segue to the next question, which talks a bit about resources. And what resources are available for startup founders, whether they are thinking of a pivot or they are thinking of starting their new venture or even just sustaining their business. And this question, I kind of want to direct that to you, Tuyet. Really want to hear from you, right? Like from an advisor of a government to the government, right? How can startups, or rather, what are the available resources from the government that the startups can utilize to be able to weather through this situation, to build a more resilient foundation for their business?
So maybe let me respond to this question on the broader context, only from the government perspective. And I guess it's not just being a founder. For anyone to be successful, that person needs to be quite resourceful themselves. And the continuous learning process, the ability to tap into all of the connections that they have built over time would be very, very valuable. When I think of resources, there are multiple things that is coming to play. Typically, in when you look at investors, some of the time they will say, oh, that is just like money. No, it's more than that. It's a connection, it's the partnership, it's the kind of experience. And also, some of the time, as Huong also mentioned, like the investor themselves is the team member. So, if they can shift the perspective on what a particular actor in their universe can represent and what kind of resource that particular actor can bring, it's about being open-minded on that particular actor, then I think it opens up a lot of possibility for a startup founder. And if we apply that method and that formula to, say, for example, the government, then it's not only coming to the government for like funding or like incentive. I think there's a lot more than that. It's about access. For example, what I have learned is the relationship between Google and NIC has already brought a lot of access that otherwise probably wouldn't be available to a bigger audience and a bigger community. But that is not all, right? The NIC has also been working with multiple stakeholders in and outside Vietnam to provide access to training, to overseas activities that can also broaden the business development capability for a startup as well. So what I would encourage the startup founders to look at is when they look at a particular connection that they have in their universe, they probably have to step back and think a lot broader about what are the different assets that connection have that can be leveraged, instead of being so fixated to a certain category of resource that they typically would think of. So that is how I would encourage people to think. And for example, advisor, right? I also advise startup. I sit on board of advisor for some of the startup that I really like the founder. And some of the time I was like, hey, use me. Like I can do a lot more for you than just advising you. If you need me to go create partnership, if you want me to go sell, I can sell for you. But the thing here is they don't think of me as, someone can sell for them. Someone can help them create partnership. Someone can open doors for them. They think of me like, okay, so this person can only do the bouncing of ideas, can only do that. No, they are more than that. So I guess when startup founder, especially in this time, when the resources are scarce, they need to also be very creative. And I think it doesn't hurt just to go ask, right? Like even if they go to a certain person that they trust in their network and like, hey, I have this situation. What's your advice? Being open-minded, being sometimes being vulnerable is a strength. And I learned it the hard way myself. So I guess in this day and age, this particular time is hard. It's also a good time to think broader and create the kind of partnership that typically you wouldn't think of in a normal time when cash is everywhere.
Thanks a lot for sharing to that. My takeaway to that is that you're absolutely right. I think there's this, I call it illusion for lack of a better word, where when startups are interacting with I won't speak on your behalf with government, but you shared a lot of that. But from a corporate standpoint, there's always this illusion that, startups needs to have a certain way of engagement with corporates, when they are approaching them. But essentially, everybody is facing similar problems. And there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of access to resources that won't be unlocked unless someone make the first move. And as simple as reaching out and dropping a message on LinkedIn and say that, hey, I kind of want to get your perspective on this, could be a really nice way to kind of get a conversation going. And who knows, further down the road, that might lead down to interesting, unique partnerships or even collaboration. I just want to do a call out to the startups who are tuning in and saying that, now that it's everyone is in kind of like a similar boat. If so, don't feel restricted when you're thinking of reaching out to corporates to kind of strike the conversation. All it takes is just a message away. So I just want to do a check-in on time. I know we have less than 5 minutes, I believe. I'll just skip to the last question and hopefully end it on a high note. Let's talk about a proactive approach, right? How can, and this is a question to everybody, right? What is your advice in terms of how can startup actively step up and attract successful partnerships with organization? In somewhat maybe a bit on top of what I've shared. Perhaps Huong, you want to go first?
Yeah, so the question is tracking. I see the question again. Step up and attract successful partnerships with these organizations. I'm trying to understand organizations here as in like big tech like Google, or just in general partnership strategies?
Just in general partnership strategies. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so this is where Tuyet was saying earlier, as times become harder, money becomes more scarce, startups need to become more creative, right? I mean, the good thing about Vietnamese is is fascinating. If you notice in Vietnam, this is why the draw and the energy of the Vietnamese startup community and founders is pretty spirited. And I think it's possibly due to the more recent history we've all gone through as a post-war generation. Many of the founders today are probably too young to even remember. But Tuyet and I were born in the 80s, in Vietnam post-war, where things were pretty hard to come by. They're not pretty abundantly available. So you kind of have to be creative, right? We learned English at school compulsory only at grade 6 onwards, right? So if you wanted to learn English before that, or even during that, you pick up whatever you had. Even at the time, I remember we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have, no offense to Google, but we didn't have YouTube. And we had, what's that? Bobby was trying to say something.
They were not born yet. The founders were not born yet.
Right. That's right. Yeah, YouTube was only in the late 90s in the Bay Area. And so, it arrived in...
So yeah, you're at risk of disclosing our age.
yeah. I'm up there, so I don't mind. But yeah, so we didn't have much, and we managed to find ways to get what we want still, right? I think this is a testament of the first quality of a founder: being resourceful, being creative, being a go-getter, getting what you want when the universe doesn't put it in a silver plate on your lap, right? Yep. How do you go still get it, right? So I think that's the very first test that your customers want to see in you, to have the conviction, the trust that they put in your hands for using your products and putting their money into your pockets, right? Likewise, investors are looking for that, to put their money in you, because it's a bet on the team for the most part at this early stage. So we want to see even ideas that you can go around and get some stuff done. Partnerships, for instance, really at the core, what does it mean? It's relationships, is about people. And so I remember even in the Bay Area, some of the growth hackers were writing down their playbook of how they would hack, to get some sort of relationships or investments. I don't know if I would recommend this strategy to go this far, but one founder talked about running LinkedIn ads targeted at the investors, right? With personalized keywords, right? So it was, investor name, and, they study investor preferences as well. Who this person is, a lot of our history, unfortunately, is public. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the information is public. So they study the investors. They have a customized contact strategy, just like winning the customers. And this investor went on his LinkedIn for days on out, kept seeing one ad directly talking to him. He gave in, and he's like, okay, I'm responding to the ad. Okay, I'll give you a meeting. And then, this founder eventually wrote that into his playbook of getting an investment, right? This is an investment. In fact, if you think about it, partnership, customers, employees, hiring, they're all similar. This is all about convincing someone, selling to someone to take your company. And so at the core, it's a sales skill. Now, how do you sell this such that people buy and convert without walking away feeling offended? I think that's the art of, it's a science and an art that each founding team will have their own playbook. But yes, I hope that helps. Not to say you go stalk them at their home, though. Please don't do that.
No, I think those are really wise words. It all comes down to people, right? And really understanding that partnership is built on trust. That's a really interesting, and not interesting, but really important call out there. Bobby and Tuyet, do you folks have anything else to add on?
You kind of want to look at these organizations, whether are they your potential customers. One of our portfolio companies sell only to, it's a B2B business. So it's a gifting platform, and they're so laser focused in the kind of services that they want to provide. So much so that, so you have two types of gifting platform, right? I mean, one you call it, employee benefits, which is more internal, and then the other one will be customer, gifting, which is more of a reward, right? But they are so laser focused to doing the external part of the gifting for companies, right? Because they realize the problem of the companies and or organizations that they need to reward their own users. So these organizations have their own users, like Google, for example. You have your clients and stuff like this, right? But as big as Google is, I don't think Google wants to start the department to say, okay, let me build this. Of course, you have all the engineers possible, but then that's owning a product. But you rather work with this company that's going to provide you the solution, so that it becomes, number one, seamless, and number two, it takes away the headache of having to maintain yet another product that may not be revenue generating. So they're so laser focused in doing that, so much so that they've built such a wide repertoire of vendors that they're actually working with different companies that are providing internal reward system companies, to share their vendor list. In so much so that if you look at the whole gifting economy, right, whether internal or external, right, then the whole ecosystem becomes bigger, and everyone becomes inter-reliant on each other, and that's when the cake becomes bigger for everyone to share. Even though you may have a small sliver, but then that's actually big enough. And this goes back to what Tuyet said in the beginning, or somewhere near the beginning, whereby companies cannot look at products in the market and then say that, oh, I don't trust Vietnamese products, or I don't trust local products. And I think we as Asian, we tend to fall into that category, whereby we tend to think that, oh, Western products are better, right? Yes, most products are quite crappy, but I think that if you discover some good ones, regardless, it doesn't matter where it comes from. I think we should look at incorporating different products or services offered by different startups, right? Otherwise, then we are, who are they going to look for? Then the second part, I think the greatest growth, of course, we think about bigger companies, MNCs and all that stuff. But I think for most economies in Southeast Asia, 90% of the economy, or maybe a bit less, 80% of the economy is driven by actual SMEs. Even the smaller banks, for example, they are SMEs, and they do need a lot of solutions, right? It's just a matter of being able, us here, the four of us, and anyone within the stakeholders, right, to basically provide the word of mouth, or direction pointing to certain parts of the ecosystem that can help the startups, right? Instead of looking to these organizations strictly just from a funding standpoint.
Tuyet, you have would you want to chime in? I am really sorry, I have to say this, that due to time, I might have to kind of request for you to kind of cut it short a little bit. I'm sorry for being disrespectful, but just being mindful of time, if you don't mind.
I will take a minute. I think what Huong shared earlier is really important. It's methodological. It sounds very theoretical, but it's true. Like, you need to understand what your potential partners would offer, where your strength are. You understand yourself first. Like, what do you want to do? What's your objective? What you're good at? What you need help? And therefore, what would be your potential partner looks like? And then the whole process of getting the partnership is really about creating a win-win-win relationship. And partnerships here is not only with a big organization, as Bobby said. There are a lot of smaller organizations, but a lot more fitting. I think it's really about fit across all levels, from the top to the bottom. It's not always having the biggest name to be the biggest and best partnership. It's more the kind of strong fit, and also the kind of win-win relationship that can be created amongst equal partners. that would make a long-term value add and value creation for everyone involved. So at the end of the day, know yourself, have the clarity and knowing where's the boundary, what you want to keep and what you want to kind of like creating relationship with other partners.
Mhm. Actually, you know what? I really like what you just mentioned, and I just want to share my perspective. Right, from a partnership standpoint, as a corporate, sometimes it's also really difficult to understand how to partner with startups. And what I meant by that is that there's so many people in an organization, in a corporate organization, and sometimes when I really like a startup solution, and I say this is awesome, this is great, uh, but how do we partner? And that's even people from the enterprise and the corporate side. Sometimes it's also not very clear, and a lot of energy and time might go into trying to figure out how this partnership works. Whereas, it might hinder the growth of the startups. And to your point, like if it might be even better if the startups look for a better fit with SMBs or other companies, which provides the value for a win-win arrangement, and they would don't have any hindrance towards their goal. Spending time trying to figure out how to partner with corporates. Just want to add that point. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for your patience. And unfortunately, I failed as a moderator to keep track of time. But once again, it's a pleasure having you folks, and thank you so much for spending those extra minutes with us. I don't think we have Q&A. We don't have time for Q&A, but if those tuning in, if you have any questions or feedback, please send them through the link that's flashed across your screen right now. And thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us, and have a good weekend ahead. And if we don't see you again, happy holidays. Thank you,
Thanks,
folks.
Thank you.
everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. Happy
Please feel
holidays.
free to reach out to us on LinkedIn if you have questions to follow up on. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, folks.